Good morning, everybody. On behalf of Dr. Ashok Gulati, first of all, I'd like to thank Professor Amar and Professor Pingali for inviting him, and I have to apologize that he could not make it. And me and Stuti are two persons working in his team, and we're representing his presentation here. And I hope to be able to do justice to the work he's already done for us, and we'll be sharing it with all of you here. So, presentation. The theme largely is that we'll be talking about three things on Indian farms. I'll start with landholding, how the changes have happened over the years. Next, I'll look at labor market, how the changes have happened there in terms of the number of labor workers we have, and how their wages have changed. Third, I'd look at the level of mechanization on Indian farms at the moment. We'll look at synergizing and interaction between these three variables, and I'll end the presentation by highlighting some challenges that the Indian farms face today and some of the solutions that are in the pipeline already and which we wish to propose. So to begin with, very clearly, and that's well established, our average landholding size has been falling. We were 2.28 hectares in 1970-71 and 1.15 now. But in terms of the number of land holdings, we've increased from 70 million to about 138 million today. It's important to see this graph. This basically talks about what we say swelling of the bottom line in case of India. We have four bigger headings where we define our land holdings: marginal, small, semi-medium, and medium and large. So by marginal, I mean less than 1 hectares. Small and medium will be 1 to 2 hectares. Small will be 1 to 2 hectares. Semi-medium is 2 to 4, and then going forward is medium to large. In 1970-71, 70% of our land holdings were small and marginal. Today they are 85%. Close to 95%, we are less than 4 hectares. So this is how we are saying that the bottom line has been swelling. Close to 55 million land holdings got added in the margin in the last category, about 11 million in the small category. The picture completes when we look at the operated area. So 138 number of land holdings operating on 160 million hectares of land. In 40 years, the operated areas fallen by 2.9 million hectares. The area operated by the 85% of our small and marginal farmers has swollen up from 21% to 44% today. So the small and marginal farmer who has land less than 2 hectares is operating on 44% of our operated land. So I'm just consolidating the two things. So between the 40 years, you can see the number of operational holdings increasing and the share of marginal and small swelling up. In case of operated area, while the total operated area has gone down, the share of small and medium and marginal has gone up. But interestingly, while we do have a reduced number of operated areas, but we have a higher GCA. And this graph shows you exactly that. The interaction is between the total operated area, the net cropped area, and the gross cropped area. From 162, the operated area has gone down to 160. But in terms of gross cropped area, we've actually increased it from 165 to 197.
Excuse me.
Sir.
I think from my own experience,
Yes, sir.
India has a unique way of measuring land in the world, gross cropped area and net cropped area.
Yes, sir.
So please explain to the audience what difference there is.
Of
What
course.
is it net off?
Of course. So if I may start with the total operated area. Now, total operated area will actually include fellow lands and forestry also, apart from land which has crops grown in them. Gross cropped area will be area on which 1 or 2 or more crops have actually grown in a financial year. Net cropped area will only be counted once, one crop.
An area twice.
It'll be a
It's counted
GCA.
as 2 hectares.
Yes. So net cropped area.
one piece of land is grown twice.
Yeah, it's counted.
Please explain. Okay.
So that is how we define the cropping intensity. So net crop.
For the Thais in this room, I recommend strongly that our statistical system make a distinction between gross cropped area and net cropped area. We only have gross cropped areas. But our understanding of the productivity of land is very strongly affected. We always say that our yield is very low because we don't look at net cropped areas.
Fairly. So having that advantage here, we do look at net cropped area. So by comparing the gross cropped area and the net crop area, we deduce that about 39% is the cropping intensity. That means 39% of the land is where double cropping happens in India. Now the question arises, why has this fragmentation really happened over the years? We've really seen the landholding size reduce. And the biggest reason is the land laws. And amongst the land laws, two big things that come out are the land ceilings and the tenancy. Now, when we gained independence, after that, the objective was to eliminate a zamindari system. Now, zamindari system gave rights exclusively to large landholders, and everybody else was tenants working as bonded laborers under them. So on the premise of ensuring greater efficiency and equity in the system, in the second 5-year plan, so we have a planning commission. We used to have a planning commission in India before. That has been replaced by a Niti Aayog. Now planning commission,
It's just called by a different name.
it's just called by, no, but then a lot of functions have also been diluted there. Yeah, lesser powerful. So the planning, so earlier, till about, we have 5-year plans which give direction to all the policies that will be executed within the next 5 years, and they are proposed at the onset. Now, 5-year plans define the strategy which will be implemented in a country. So now, currently we're undergoing our 12th 5-year plan, and after that, we would not have any 5-year plans going forward. So this policy of removing tenancy and adding land ceilings was introduced in the second 5-year plan. Now, I am presenting to you here a table that talks about, as on date, what kind of land ceilings do we have. Now, land ceilings are defined in terms of the quality of the land. If you are an irrigated land, and let me give you an example there, India today has 54% of its gross cropped area irrigated through rains. So 46% is under assured irrigation. So 54% is rain fed. Now, if you have an irrigated land and you're sowing 2 crops, your land ceiling will be the second column. Then you have an irrigated land with 1 crop, the land ceiling will be the second column. And then if you're a dry land, the ceiling increases for you. So on an average, in case of India, we have about 6.5 hectares. And this is an average number, very rudimentary calculated from the state numbers that I've had. 6.5 hectares of irrigated land with 2 crops will be the ceiling, beyond which the government owns the right to take away the surplus and redistribute it. Second, 10.3 hectares of irrigated land with 1 crop, and about 18 to 26 in case your land is dry. Next thing is tenancy. It's interesting. So the policy basically said that they wanted to abolish or restrict tenancy. How did they do it? They said that there is a ceiling beyond which it will get redistributed. Now the ceiling resulted in 3 big problems rather. One, the landowners who did not want to undertake agricultural activities let the land be fallow. They did not use it towards agriculture activities. Now, because they did not want to, and they feared losing the ownership in case they actually lent it to other farmers or to agricultural laborers. Second, because they were restricted to their land, their mobility of labor was restricted. So even if they wanted to diversify their labor and income by going into non-farm sector, they could not, fearing that their ownership could actually get diluted in case they got away from their land physically. Third thing, even the person who was tilling the land in terms of tenant lost out. One, there was no formal contract as in date. There is no formal contract when they actually have ceilings because they lose. There are a lot of states like Kerala, for example. Kerala totally bans tenancy. Then there are states like UP, Bihar, and Madhya Pradesh, where they say that we will lease land only to disabled people or to widowed women or to people who are in the army. Nobody else is legally allowed to lease land. Then there are states like UP, like Punjab, like Haryana, who say that if your land has been with a tenant beyond a stipulated time, you lose your ownership. Because of all this, there are no formal contracts. So because of this, the person who's been regularly tilling it, one, he doesn't have a contract, therefore he does not get input access to subsidies which he otherwise should have actually gotten from the government. Second, he doesn't have an incentive to invest in his farm because he knows beyond a point he'll be shifted to another piece of land. So that's the problem we're facing at the moment. So that kind of explains why we still have fallow lands continuing and which are getting shrunk because of the population pressure. So we're about 1.25 billion at the moment. Third thing, why fragmentation's been happening is non-farm sectors not being able to absorb people out of agriculture. I bring this to you, why? Because, I take it up from Professor J. Kuhn's presentation, small may not be beautiful necessarily. Here the example is two extreme states, Punjab and Kerala. And I say extreme in terms of their land holding sizes at the moment. Punjab and Haryana are the states which have the highest average land holding size at the moment, 3.8 hectares. Kerala is on the other spectrum with a 0.22. But if we looked at the gross value of output per hectares in 11-12 terms, and that's given in the right-hand side small box there, Kerala has produced about 1,26,000 of GVO per hectares, whereas Punjab is 76,000. This explains the value of output that they are generating or the basket of goods that they are producing. So that basically means if you're producing high value agriculture like spices, horticulture, so this just gives you an example. This just gives you an example that small may not be bad also. It's a different game. So that ways you'll have to diversify your production basket away from maybe a cereal or a standard crop.
Earnings of per holding? Or
so this is value of output. Value of output.
Per holding.
Yes, sir.
Gross value.
Gross. So it's not
per hectare.
So this is per hectares.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So while I clearly, we know it now that the land holding size has been falling. Now the question arises about the people who are working on that land. And I would want to present some numbers from Census of India.
I want to leave with the question hanging in the air. What's the point of having per hectare? Why not per person?
So
because family sizes differ.
Yeah.
Yeah, I leave that hanging.
No, sure.
Why is land so sacred that you want to maximize per hectare yield?
I agree. Sure, sir. So I could, okay. So going on, so as I said, landholding size has been shrinking. But if we look at the number of people who are working on the same land, so we start by looking at agri workers at the moment. Now there are two sources of finding out what the number of agri workers in India are at a point in time. One is Census of India that repeats after every 10 years. The other one is NSSO, that's the National Sample Survey Organization, that does survey every 5 years. So the bigger problem between identifying what source to use where is basically when we wanted to see how much of involvement at the national level of agricultural workers was, census gave us the split. But NSSO, which I'll be showing in the eventual slide, tells us industry-wise split of the laborers also. So let me run through first this slide that says our population and because it's every 10 years, you can see the columns that says 91, 2001, and 2011. So the population's gone up from 846 million to about 1.2 billion. total workers have gone up from 314 million to 482 million. Now, the workers, if we look at rural and urban split, is basically 72 and 27.3. So while 72% of our workers live in rural areas, 68% of our people live in rural areas. So population split at the moment is 68-32, while the workers split is 72-27. Now, if we look at agricultural workers, census gives us a number of 263 million people in agriculture in 2011 as a percentage, as total workers. So as a percentage of total workers, it's about 55%. Now, if we look at cultivators and agricultural laborers, let me give you a definition there as to how we define cultivators, is basically if you own land. And that is where the difference between NSSO and census will be. Here, ownership of land is important, but under NSSO, you could not, even if you're not an owner, you will still be counted as a farmer in case you had a right to decide what to produce and when to cut. So here, as a percentage of total agricultural workers, 45% are cultivators, 55% are agri-laborers. So 2 points here. One, as a percentage of total workforce, cultivators are about 25%. As you can see, the second point, cultivators have gone down and agri-laborers have gone up. So cultivators have actually gone down. That means ownership of land is diluting and the number of agri-laborers operating on the land has been going up. Let me look at the employment-wise sectoral split here. Now, this data is from NSSO. What this says is, from about 60% of the total employment in 2000, agricultural employments come down to 49%. So in case of India, we use two numbers, and that's what we say. As NSSO, we have about 49% of our workforce employed in agriculture. As per census, it's about 55%. So these are the numbers which do float in the market, and that's the number we've actually been using. Estimated also, we've deduced it from these surveys.
Does the data have seasonal fluctuations
In
the numbers?
sorry, sir.
It's only one shot a year.
So it's just, so every 10 years. In census, NSSO is every 5 years. NSSO,
Well, within 1 year, there's only one.
yeah, just
one
once.
collection.
Yeah.
But the difference between the numbers I showed yesterday and these ones, this one basically aggregates everybody working in the agriculture sector. It doesn't differentiate between people who say agriculture is the main occupation versus the secondary occupation. This is where I think the problem is coming.
You know, actually,
But we can talk about this later.
Sure.
Yeah.
Done. Okay.
Let's finish up and then we come back to this
Sure.
discussion.
Done. So this is a slide that reiterates what I've really said already, but it runs you through the years, comparing that from 69.7% of total workers who were agricultural workers in 51, we are about 55% now. Now the question arises about wages, and we've collected these wages. So first, these are farm wages. These are of agricultural laborers. And the thing I will want to draw home from this slide will be that the agricultural labor today is becoming expensive. And that's the point I'm trying to draw home from this. I will tell you how I've calculated this. These numbers are calculated from the Labor Bureau, and we get different activity-wise the daily wage rate for these agricultural laborers. We estimated for 20 bigger agricultural states, which looked at 93% of country's workforce. We estimated their individual state-wise monthly wages. We weighted average it up for calculating it for the national level. And these are the numbers that we've done. So there are two curves, one is nominal and one is real. We deduced real by using CPIALs, the Consumer Price Index for agricultural laborers, and the data is on 2004 and 5. And it clearly shows that there was a structural break in 2006 and 7. 2006 and 7 was that time when we really saw a sudden jump in the year-on-year increase in the Indian farm wages. Now, what explained this high farm wages? There are 2-3 things which are really important and need mention here, and I will want to be quoting Dr. Gulati's CACP paper there, where he's econometrically tested from years 1995 to 12-13 what the factors were driving the farm wage growth rate. First biggest reason he found out was the growth in the construction sector, which pulled out these agricultural laborers, shrinking the supply of agricultural laborers and thus pushing up the wage rate. Second was Manrega. Manrega, it wasn't an important factor, but it did play a role. And I will just initiate what this Manrega is. Manrega is an acronym that stands for National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. The scheme started in 2005, was implemented across India by 2008, but the scheme assured unskilled manual labor employment for at least 100 days in every financial year to whosoever who applied for it. If you did not get that employment within 15 days of application, you were entitled to a unemployment allowance. Now, what Manrega did was, even if there are lot of impact assessment studies claiming that Manrega, and MG in front of Narega stands for Mahatma Gandhi's, so it was re-christianed later years. So it's a Rural Employment Guarantee Act. Now, what Manrega did was, one, it gave an alternate opportunity, job opportunity to the agricultural laborers, and plus it increased the base or baseline of the wages, that minimum wages that these agricultural laborers got. Third, why these wages got up was that the commodities were selling at better remunerative prices. And so there was an increase in the cost with a lag eventually going to the labor. And I will just show you. So sorry, I missed one point. There was this point where we talk about growth in agriculture, which catapulted the performance in agriculture, and therefore the relative incentives going to agriculture were growing. And this basically shows you plan-wise what an average growth rate of India was and how it compared with agricultural growth rate. In 11th plan, we had an average growth rate of 4.1 for 5 years between 7 and 12. In the 12th plan, 2014 and 2015 were bad drought years, consecutive drought years for India, and that's when we had a crash in our agricultural performance. And the average growth rate that's come out for the 5 years is about 1.7. For the current financial year, 16-17, the first advanced estimate says that we'll have a growth rate of about 4.1% this year in agriculture. If I next look at relative price incentives, which were improving for Indian agriculture, we can see that how the index has been going up, and particularly since the 2008 and 9 crisis, which again, which made a lot of our agriculture commodities globally very competitive because global prices were rising, it actually pushed up the entire relative price index. So there were two things. One, the global food price index making some of our commodities competitive, and there was a ban simultaneously, so we could not really harness a lot of opportunities. And second was the National Food Security Mission that started during the same time in India. And part of that mission was that the MSP, the procurement of pulses and cereals, had to be aggressively promoted for the upcoming 5 years. So on an average, about 20 to 22% of MSP increase was witnessed in rice and wheat in the 2 years between 7, 8, 8, 9. And that's how the relative price incentives for agriculture has been going up. Now, this is where I bring together the mechanization. So I have 4 graphs here. So one is the real wage index, which has been going up, and that represents the costs which are due for the farmers. Second is the relative price index, which I'm trying to show that the farmers are getting compensated on the revenue side because of higher relative index. And then is the tractor sales and the long-term credit index. Now, tractor sales is the red line with the rectangles. Now, that has witnessed a sharp increase. And I will show you how the tractor density looks at the moment in the eventual slides. But at the moment, what I'm trying to draw home is that the long-term credit policy on the support side, which, by the way, actually supported, which majority of this long-term investment was into tractor purchase, supported the tractor purchase, and therefore the tractor sales have been going up. So on the revenue side, you had greater relative price incentives. There was rising wage, which was causing you to substitute your labor with greater mechanization wherever possible. And there was a long-term credit policy which gave that thrust to the increasing mechanization in the country. At the moment, we have about 5 million tractors. And it's a number we've deduced from the Tractors Association, and I still not vouch for the accuracy of the number, but that represents fairly the number of tractors at the moment. In terms of density of tractors, there are about 26 tractors per 1,000 hectares of GCA, gross cropped area, in the moment. So in terms of operational holdings, 40 to 45% of our operational holdings use tractors today. And then is the tractor sales and the tiller sales, which have actually gone up in the years. And this is an important slide where we see how public and private investments in agriculture have actually changed forms. In 1980-81, private sector's share in total investments in agriculture was 54%. Today, it's 85%. So as total capital formation as a percentage of agri-GDP has gone up from about 10 to 22%. So it's largely private sector, largely investments into mechanization that has been happening. Now, what explains this increase in mechanization? And I'm bringing together the facts that I've already laid here. One is the rising private investment in agriculture. Second, rising real wages, which is causing you to shift away from labor and hoping to substitute mechanization wherever possible. But there are problems there also, and I will talk about it. Remunerative improvement, because you've had better prices in the recent years. Fourth, greater access to institutional credit.
Would you venture a guess as to the causation between number one and number two?
Sure. So, clearly the challenges, and I'm coming down to the end of my presentation here, the challenges that the Indian farmers are facing today is clearly rising input costs with labor becoming expensive, land becoming scarce. Average landholding size has been falling, and there is greater marginalization of the Indian farmer today. And there's a number we've calculated, and that says that number of people tilling the same land has actually doubled in these 40 years. NABARD says, and NABARD is a rural bank, that says every 5 to 6 years, India is adding 10 million farmers. Farming real income growth rates have actually been very slow. In terms of now farmer income, we've calculated a number. In 2002 and 3, farmer earned about $44 per month, one farmer. Now, in 12-13, the number is equivalent to $118 per month. There are states which have actually witnessed negative real growth rate of farmers' income also, like Bihar, as Professor Pingali had mentioned yesterday, and West Bengal. Last is, and amongst the many is, that farming is becoming financially unfeasible. It's non-inclusive of small and marginal farmers, and it's environmentally unsustainable. And I can detail why we've used these names if there are questions raised. So the way forward, yes, sir.
I think.
Finish?
No, I want to make sure.
Sure, sir.
You are saying that agricultural laborers have their wages increasing.
Yes, sir.
Farmers, on the other hand, suffer. That means that farmers, excluding agricultural laborers.
True.
I mean, there are two classes.
And absolutely.
And the two are The two are really separate.
And it's no, I will tell you. So I will tell you, sir. So the way NSSO, because the income of a farmer is calculated from NSSO survey, and NSSO survey says farmers are of two types. One, clearly you have a land right of ownership. Second, even if you do not have a land right ownership, if you have a right to decide what is getting produced at a point in time, you will be counted towards this.
Your tenant or whatever.
Sure. So now what we're trying to say is all over India, between the 10 years of between 2002-3 and 12-13, real farmer income growth rates have gone up by 3.5% per annum. Nominal, they've gone up about 11.7%. But then, within this, there are states who've actually witnessed a much higher growth rate and a much lower growth rate. So Bihar and West Bengal emerge as those two states where in these 10 years, the income growth rate of farmers in real terms is actually negative.
But in other states, it's highly.
Oh, absolutely.
So let's talk about that, sir.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I was just clarifying what it is. Yeah. And
I think we need to really wrap this up quickly.
sorry, yeah, I'll just do that. So the way forward is clearly that we need to reform our land policies, and tenancy and ceilings is one bigger policy change that we are envisaging. So the earlier Planning Commission and now the Niti Aayog has come out with a Model Act of Land Reforms in 2016. The Act says that you will protect the ownership right and it will facilitate creation of formal contracts so that there is greater formal tenancy that is happening at the moment. So that is already underway, but then it's again at a proposed stage, and we wish that is something that will give the thrust to consolidation of land holdings, which we seek in the coming times. Next way forward will be
That is union government policy.
union governments. So agriculture is a state subject. So union government proposes, and there are 3 states who've come up and said they'll be happy to implement it. But again, it's at a nascent stage. All of these states customize, as you had seen in terms of land ceilings also. The range varies, and therefore even here. And then we need an improved access to inputs like machinery and to extension services. And because machinery was one of the main objectives, I'm going to show you 3 examples after this slide where we are innovating in terms of how to deliver machinery to a very small and a marginal farmer, and I will show you that. So in case of machinery, clearly, these are very small farmers, and bigger investments in machinery is overcapitalization. So what we need is machinery for hire model. So clearly, the model we're looking at is like an Uber tractor, and this is happening in India already. I give you 3 examples. One is EM3 Agri Services, where what they're doing is they own the machinery, and then you can just call them up and hire it, and they deliver it for different crop stages. And that's what they've been doing. Next model is, again, you facilitate your ownership. So what government is subsidizing is, it is helping you procure these larger machinery. It subsidizes that capital investment, and they let you sublet it to farmers, and the government facilitates the process. This is a central government scheme where the state governments have been adding to the extent of subsidization, which is finally getting delivered to the farmers. And then is this FarmMart. Now, FarmMart model says, even if FarmMart in itself as a platform, technology platform, does not own machinery, it connects the people who own it and have it, and they have it idle in times, to people who would want it. So that's like a technology platform where you're just connecting and sharing. You may not need to own it. And I think I will just end here, and that's all, sir. Thank you.